Well, good morning, everyone, and I'm glad you could attend. And basically, we're going to look a little deeper into some isometrics, mainly dealing with the isoconfig.xml file. Some of this had been scraped or touched on in a previous webcast called the Isometric Title Block Configuration. We dealt a little bit with the isoconfig file in that one, but that was all about just setting up your title block and everything inside Plant 3D for your isometrics. Didn't get into any other settings and all. So we're going to pick up basically where that left off. I'm going to be using same project and everything, but also let me make sure my screen's showing here. I should be seeing my screen now. I'm going to be using the same project and everything that I did with that one, and I have here the Vandelay B isometric style, which we created. This is exactly the style that right where it left off, with two exceptions. So I don't like to show have smoke and mirrors. So I want to show you the two things that have happened since then. If you were to go to production ISO, one of the things that's different than the one out of that we had in that particular webinar, the isometric title block configuration. On the advanced tab here in it, we set the create splits automatically and had set it up to more. I personally don't use that myself. I like to use the ISOs. Let me hit cancel and get back up here. I should have been on this tab. I like to use this breakpoint. I like to control when it splits using the breakpoint on the ISO tab myself. So because of that, I myself always turn this feature off so that I'm controlling the breaks and not the software. So that's just a personal preference. So that has been changed in the project setup to where that's not turned on. Another thing that's different is I like to preset my revision number. That was done just so I could speed things up today as we're doing these things, because I do use that revision number in my file naming and stuff, which you don't see in the out-of-the-box settings from that one. So I've preset the revision number in the project setup. Those two things have been done. Everything else is right where that webcast left off. Also, this was Rev 0 when we did these in the previous webcast. We set these as Rev 0, so these will be Rev 1. They'll be a completely different set of drawings. Very similar. I haven't made any change to the piping or anything, so they'll be the identical drawings, just another revision level. So what we're going to be dealing with in this one is the Isoconfig XML. Every ISO theme, if you go into Isometrics, I'll go into Vandelay B, which is the one we created. There's an Isoconfig XML. I'm going to go ahead and open this up, and that's what it looks like. Now I'm using a piece of software called FoxE to edit my XML file. This is a freebie I got online. Can't even remember where I got it. You can just go and you could type in to Google, XML Edit Editor, and you'd find this one or many others. It's just my personal preference because it's the one I've used for a while. Now you can also open up these ISO configs with Notepad. So I'm going to open it with Notepad. As a matter of fact, in the other webinar, this is what I used, was Notepad, mainly because I didn't want to get into showing a different sound system, and most people have Notepad, so that's why I chose to use it. But you can see when you're looking at it in Notepad, it's really hard to follow. There's so much information. Here it's a little bit easier organized. This is very much is basically the Notepad, but they actually have some color added to where you can see what you're doing and stuff. But mainly it's the setup over here where it's organized in a tree feature that makes it a little bit easier when you're using an editor. So these right here are called your main tags. A lot of this stuff, this is just the main section. So you can see here, if I look at output here, there's the output. Files here, there's where it's going. And you can kind of see where everything is kind of already defined here. Now, that sheet number is going to be lower down here because this is the end of file name format. So it's everything's built into here to where it's on both sides, and this is the main tag tree. We're just going to go over some of, I'm going to describe all of these, but a lot of these we won't touch because they're in the project setup. If it's in the project setup, my personal opinion is modify it in the project setup. There are some things that you can't modify in the project setup that you can only do here, and that's where we're going to get into doing some tweaking. Now the output here, this is a very simple one-line thing. Up here is just some standard XML information for how what is starting up through here, but really the only thing you can do here, and they've even got it highlighted over here, is you could force to uppercase is set to true out of the box. If you set it to false, that means your bill of materials, cut list, any text and things, what it is going to be a mixture of upper and lower case characters depending on how it is in your catalog or how you entered it. So it's forcing everything to uppercase. Outside of that, most everything else here is kind of in your settings in your project in different places, but that's the only, that one force uppercase is not in there. So, you know, if you didn't want it to be all uppercase, set that to false. That's all you got to do. But outside of that, really not much you're going to do right there. Files. This again is also mainly in the project setup, so it's not something I'm going to deal with, but you can see here it's just telling it what is the name of the drawing that your isometric symbols are being stored in. Here's my template. All this was set in the project. Here's what it's using for the ISO key and the property translation. You got a log file here, which is nowhere in the project setup, but it's just the name of the log file. You can see it right there. It's creating a log file every time I create an isometric, and that's just the name of the log file. So if you don't like the name of the log file, you could change it here. But outside of that, again, project setup is pretty much all you're going to do there. Advanced default, this is all those default settings. So you, again, when I came here and I was like, production ISO, this advanced button, there's your advanced settings. Here's your revision number, the override existing. All that is what's being covered in the, every bit of this is in the project setup. So again, do it there, but you can kind of see what's going on here. For instance, here's that revision number. Here's where it's telling to overwrite the files and just some of those settings. But again, it's a lot easier to see it all and just check boxes and stuff like that. So again, that's one I would just do there. Now, file name format and drawing name format. File name format you can set up in the project setup, but you can't quite get everything as detailed as you can here. So we're going to do a combination. I'll set up a file name format, and then we're going to tweak it in here. So we'll do that later. That's going to be one of the first things we do here, along with the drawing name format. Drawing name format, I do not know if it's not in the project setup. So this is something you can only do here, and we're going to do that at the same time we do the file name format. View, this is basically title block stuff. The area of your title block, north arrows, schemes about it. Everything in here we touched on in that first isometric title block configuration webcast. So we're not going to touch on that again here. Geometry, this is basically general geometry settings. You can see some pipe gap links, stuff like that. All this is done in project setup, so don't worry about it. Units, this again is basically precisions for stuff like dimensions or boat lengths and things like that. For the most part, it's all handled in the project setup. There's one thing that you can only do here that we'll tweak that one thing at the end of the webinar just to show you, and that's rounding. We can tell it to round or not to round, things like that. So that's something we may do in here. Everything we're going to do has actually came from either a support case or a question in a training class. So while I've had people in webinars request going over the isoconfig file, we're going to do actual real world examples that I've had in support cases and stuff through the years is what we're touching on. So that's why we'll touch on the units, because I've had a support case where somebody needed rounding and turned off. And so that's why we'll touch on that. That's pretty much all you'd want to do in here. Everything else is in the project setup. Skew, split, everything there, project setup. Don't even bother going through here. It just gets pretty confusing. There's nothing you can do in here that you can't do in project setup. Data. Now, this is one we'll do later. This is basically where you handle table data list handling, such as bill of materials and cut lists and things like that. So this is where you can tweak how those lists are created. For instance, we're going to want to add instrumentation to our bill of material. This is where we do that. So we'll come back and do that here in a little bit. Table is the actual tables formats themselves for bill of materials and web lists and things like that. That is done in the table setup. We actually did that in the last webcast where we set up our bill of materials and cut list. Only thing we could do in here is tweak maybe column widths and stuff like that, which we did in that webcast, so we're not going to go through that again. So it's already been covered. Logging, this is basically the format of this isoconfig file up here, how it's putting up the information. You can tweak this format, you can tweak this format if you don't like it right here by using different codes and stuff. I have never had that in a support case or anybody say they don't like the way things are formatted in here, so I'm not going to cover it, but that's where you could do that if you wanted to do that at all. Just never would know why. Title block here, again, this is for where your attributes are title block for your title block or information is. This works hand in hand with this iso.atr file. We did that in the first webcast, so we will touch on this iso.atr file for a couple of things in this one, but we're not going to do anything in here for the title block here because basically this is reading that iso.atr file. That's all where it gets its information. Layout optimization. This is for optimizing the annotations, dimensions, how much information goes on the drawing. Again, all that is in the project setup. Tweak it there, because if you make one little mistake on something here that you can do, which you can do in the project setup, you're going to really mess some things up. I'll give you an example. I was playing here one time and I doubled this number and doubled this number just to see what would happen. ISO that normally took 45 seconds to create suddenly was taking 30 minutes to create. So just tweaking the wrong thing here, you can wreak havoc on how it's creating stuff. So my opinion there, all that's set in there, just leave this as is. Themes, this is the main place. This is where it handles name configurations. This is one of the main places we're going to be playing today with a lot of things, because this is probably the most common area where people need to tweak. You can see here, we'll go through this a little bit more at a time, but each theme is, you can see this one's the default theme. You may recognize these from the project setup, small bore piping. Here's existing piping and just the different themes that come out of the box. This is where we're going to play quite a bit today. Lastly is filters. This is basically where you have component identification for your different table data and stuff like that, your annotation things, so how it knows. So for instance, if I came in here and we'll just find something that makes a little sense here, there's components. I was hoping to hit pipe, but I can't remember where it is in here. But basically, I should have counted down and found exactly where it is. But all right, there's pipe. All right, so this filter, the name is pipe. It's got a value of type equals pipe or type equals pipe fixed. Now this name is coming from what it's looking at in the properties palette. If I look at a piece of pipe, is this content ISO symbol definition. See where it says type equals pipe. So if it hits anything that is called type pipe, then it will look. Well, actually, as I'm reading it back, I'm telling you backwards there. So if it finds any type equals pipe or type equals pipe fixed, then in here it's pipe. And then up here under any kind of theme or annotation scheme, it's going to be just listed as pipe. So you won't see up there pipe fixed, because this is the filter. This is kind of a SQL type thing, because this is very much type equals pipe or type equals pipe fix is very much a SQL command for searching and querying. So this is basically doing a SQL query and converting anything it finds there to pipe. Anything it finds this is that's not item code, or it's not, if item code is not null, then it's doing this particular filter. So these filters, I'm going to tell you the exact same thing Autodesk tells you. Don't mess with them. Don't change them or anything, because you can wreak havoc on your isometrics. Leave the ones out of the box as is. If you need to add your own, nothing wrong with that. Add your own to have additional stuff happening here, but leave the ones out of the box alone, because they are set specifically to work with everything that's coming out of the box. So that's basically something you want to leave intact. But the ones we're going to fool with, where you can do some tweaking: file name format, drawing name formats, that's going to be the first two. Then units, we'll tweak that a little bit at the end. Not much you can do there, but data and themes, a lot we can do there, and those are where we're going to spend the majority of our time. So we'll start with the file name format, the drawing name format. So basically, you can see here out of the box, we're at the end of the pipeline number. I don't know if you've ever seen that pipeline number article I wrote. That's what this is driving some of these names, my line numbers, instead of being 21.2. That's why I have this in here. So that's an article on Hagerman.com you can look up. But anyways, this is the line number. And basically, pointing at these, all these are done, but we're going to just concentrate on these for sake of time. These are sheet 1 and sheet 2. I put a manual breakpoint someplace on that pipeline to make it break into 2 sheets. So this is what it's doing out of the box. Line number out of the box with a tweak from that article, out of the line number and things like that. Now, what I want, if you notice, if you looked at my PNIDs, I use a system, for instrumentation for PNID 312 is my PNID, my instrumentation code dash sequence number. If I did a process flow diagram, it would be I310 dash sequence number. So I have a sequence there for that. Orthographic drawings, you'll see P140. P is for piping, 140 is for my piping layout. Okay. Isometrics in the system I use, P141 would be my drawing number to reference for my code for the isometrics. So basically, the way I would want to number these drawings, instead of the way they are out of the box, my file name should be P141 dash line number 2102.1 for the revision 1. These two here would be P141-1100 underscore 1 for sheet 1 underscore 2 for sheet 2, 0.1 for the revision number. So that's the way I want my file numbers to be, which I don't have that option to do them exactly like that out of the box. Also, my drawing name number, that I want here. So instead of this line number, I want this to be drawing number. So I want to change this to drawing number in my title block and use the drawing number here. And I want it to be, as I have here, P141, so capital P with a space, 141-2102. That, if you looked at any of my other drawings, I'm just going to look at a PNID. There it is, I312001. I want to follow the same system and have a drawing number here that follows that same system. Likewise, the sheet 1 of 2, you can see I've already got sheet 1 of 1. And if you looked at the other two, sheet 1 of 2 and sheet 2 of 2, that's already in here. So that's the way I want it to work. It's basically that exact same system. So that's what I want to set up. Now, out of the box, in the project setup, I don't have a method to get that P141 right there in my file name, or P141, because it doesn't know that. All my isometrics do that. So I want to get that into my, it's going to read all these properties from the piping itself. So I want to get this information into my piping so that I can pull it in and use it. To do that, I'm going to have to define some properties, but I don't want to define properties just using the method of going into the project setup and adding the properties, because I want to hard code those in there. So I'm going to do what's called defining calculation properties to do that. To get to that in my program, I'm going to do cal. Now let me show you one other thing before I forget that I want to do. That's a change from the title block that we did before. In the title block I did in the other webinar, because I didn't want to get into property calculations in that one, I made the installation thickness to where this inch symbol is hard-coded in my title block, so all of them have it. That was so it would say 2 inches, because when you put that installation thickness, there's no inch symbol. Likewise, if I went into this one where I don't have an installation thickness, I end up with an inch symbol with no information. So I don't like that. I don't want the inch symbol there if I don't have an installation thickness. So I'm going to fix that at the same time. So that's why I said there might be a little bit of crossover here. So this is where I get to the plant calculation definition. So I'm going to type in calc for calculation, pops up here, and there's plant defined calc properties. Again, if you've ever done that piping line number article, if you went to pipe run component, there's where we define the pipeline number, how it's working inside that article and everything. So I've touched on this in articles and stuff in the past, but this is going to be something part of the pipeline group. So you can recognize the tree here, exactly the same tree when we go to the project setup. I'm going to do this one in the pipeline group, so that way every piece of pipe is going to get it. And I'm going to create one for the file. So for the file, I want P141, lowercase p141. I want to be able to pull that information from every piece of pipe. So I'm going to create one called ISO, because it's just for isometrics, and it's just for my file names. So I'll call it ISO file. And in this particular case, it's simply going to be a piece of text, single quote, P141, single quote. Pretty simple on that one. I'm then also going to get the drawing number so I can pull it. I need capital P with a space 141. That's what I want to put in my title block. So I'm going to create one, and I'm going to call this one ISO drawing. And this one's going to be single quote, capital P space 141, single quote. That's all I got to do for a text string. And I'll hit apply again so that I have those two. Now that installation thickness, I'm going to get a little more creative for it, because I want to have something that gives me the installation with the inch sign. So I'm going to create one more for it. I'm going to call it INS for installation, THK for thickness. And for it, I'm going to actually use a property, because here you can see I've got properties, and I can pull up the installation thickness. Right here, I'm going to use this one with the 2 pipelines. That's your concatenate symbol. And I'm going to concatenate installation thickness with a single quote, inch sign, single quote. So that's all I'm doing for that one. We're not going to go into any more detail in this particular calculated properties manager, but just to let you just to kind of give you a quick overview, I can do formulas where I can add, subtract, multiply, divide properties. And I can concatenate them. I can do math functions inside parentheses. So you can see I can build a property based on other properties here and have a lot more functionality. And for like the P3D line group, I could, for instance, take the nominal size and multiply it by, to get alternate units, stuff like that, any type of thing I want to do. And then I have some functions here for substring, upper to lower string, and to number that I could also do. So you've got some different functions. These are all. I wish it would add some functions like if statements. That would be nice, but they don't right now. This is all you have, but you can get a little better customization here. So it's not something you may want to check out sometime. You can see there's different sections depending on what you're doing. These are the only 3 I need right now, though. I'm hard coding P141 for the file name, hard coding the P141 like that for the drawing number, and then I've got my installation thickness being created where it'll give me the 2 installation with the inch symbol. That being said, we'll hit close and we're ready to set up that information. Now, before we put it in the isoconfig file, I need to get those properties I just created into my title block. But first, let me show you where they are. If I pick a piece of pipe here, I can come down here under process line, and there you go. ISO file, ISO drawing, insulation thickness. There's no insulation thickness, so it's putting an inch sign in there, but the title block won't show it if that's all it has. But it looks at this point, you know, like information that could be changed. It acts like I could too, but you can see if I try to change it to something else, it will take it. But as soon as I hit escape, come right back to the same piece of pipe, it's right back to the original hard-coded text. So you can't physically change it. So for that reason, since I've hard-coded this with those calculated properties, I don't want people to see them or to try to change them. So I'm going to change that in my project setup. If I go to the project, the P3D line group, right up here. Well, there we go. Down at the bottom, you'll see there's the three I just created. ISO file, ISO drawing, ISO thickness. I like to make them read only and not visible. That way they don't show up in property palettes and object views and things like that, and people don't get tempted to try to change them. And by read only, they won't even be able to if they are tempted. So I like to do that myself just to kind of get them in the background there. But I want to change that drawing number in the title block. Right now it's reading the line number. I want to change insulation thickness the way it's working. So what I'm going to do is come over here to my title block setup. So this is a little crossover, just getting a little more detailed here. And I'm going to actually go into block editor on it. So this is the one in my template, exactly like it was done in. Let me close that. That's really table setup, place title block attributes. Is that where I do it? Yeah, title block. Now I'm going to have to go here anyways in a minute. So title block attributes is a good way to get here because I want to do a couple of things here. First of all, actually, that's where I needed to go, where it says line number. This is going to be my drawing number now, so I'm going to go ahead and change that to drawing number. And this attribute here, I like them to match, so I'm going to say that's my drawing number. Okay, so this is where the map attribute, you can also see an insulation thickness. I've already taken out the inch sign off the hard code, but that was just to save some time. If I hit map attributes here, drawing number currently is mapped to line number tag. That's why I was putting LS-2102 in there. I want to change it to drawing name. All right, drawing name is a dedicated attribute value. It is drawing name format. Whatever drawing name format is, that's what drawing name is. So that's being controlled in the isoconfig XML. So that's why I'm using it there. To me, it's the drawing number. That's why I called it drawing num. Here's the insulation, which is using insulation thickness. I'm going to tell it to use my INS thickness that I created with the calc property. So that way I don't have to have the inch symbol in there anymore. It'll just use that calculated property, and I'll get the results I want, which you'll see later. So that's the correction from last time that I'm doing. I've got this, not really a correction, just a different way I'm doing it. Hit OK. Now there are three other properties that are important to me. What happens here is whatever attributes are in here, that's what gets assigned to this ISO ATR file. In order for me to reference them in the ISO config, they have to be referenced in the ISO ATR. So I don't need my insulation thickness in there because I just assigned it. But I do want to get my ISO drawing that I just created to stay in my title block. And for whatever reason, I am not getting the placement of it. So we'll close and redo this, open it up again. Somewhere up here I should have, I'm on the wrong one here. All right. Let's see, title block attributes. Let's try it again. That was unusual. Okay, ISO drawing. Now it's letting me place them. I don't know why that was not the minute ago. All right, so ISO drawing. I just had to reopen it. This is something that I actually don't need to see in my title block, so I'm going to make it teeny tiny, just a habit I'm into whenever I don't want to see them. And I'm also going to make it invisible. But first, I got to get it placed in here. So ISO drawing, which I just created, I'll place here. ISO file, same one, I'll just place right beside it down here. And I'm going to take the number. Number here is the 2102 portion. What we had assigned in here was the whole ls-2102. So I'm going to assign number in here so I can access it in my ISO config file. Once I've got those, we'll hit close. Just go select all three, go to my properties palette and set them to invisible. Standard AutoCAD, but that way they won't show up, but they are there, which you will see in just a minute. All right, once I've got this set up the way I want it, close the block editor, save the changes. I'm going to go ahead and return to project setup and save changes to my template. I believe I haven't checked this. I meant to, but yeah, there you go. ISO attribute ATR. See, there's those three I just added. Now, the reason I added them, I could have manually added these, but if I manually added that information for this section, the second I ever went to title block setup again, it would override them, and I'd have to add them again. By putting those invisible attributes in my title block, it put them in the ISO attribute, and they're there to stay. They won't disappear on me in the future. So that was the whole reason I put those in there. This is what I need for my ISO config. Now, notice it's referring to them as attribute 7, attribute 8, and attribute 9. That's the way I have to refer to them, so I have to remember that. Attribute 7 is my drawing number version. Attribute 8 is my ISO file. So those things I have to remember. Write it down, print this file out, whatever you want to do to make it easier on you. Now, what I'm going to do next is save this out. And before I do, I want to make one more little change to my ISO style setup. Oh, remember I told you file naming? We're right here. I can actually create a file name, a custom file name, but I can't get what I want. Because what I want for my custom file name is a dash and an underscore right here and a period right here. It won't let me do that. What it will let me do, though, just to let you see how it passes information to that ISO config, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to say, okay, I want that first part was my ISO file. That second part, that was going to be my number. The next part I want in there is my revision. But what it won't let me do is put in there dash. I can't put quotes around it. There's nothing I can do. All it will accept are property names. I got rid of the percent sign by accident, so that messed everything up. There we go. All it wants is the property names. That's all it'll allow me to do here. So you can see I'm getting close to what I want. P141 2102. I just don't have the dash, but then it gives me revision number. 0 or 1 or whatever the revision is, -1, which is the sheet number. So these are reversed from what I want. And I can't put the delimiters in there. That's just the way it works. There's nothing I can do. I could change the delimiter, but it's only the delimiter between the file name and the sheet number. So that's all I can control here, other numeric or alphabetic, stuff like that. That's as close as I'm going to get, but it will let you see how things pass. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay. Let's go to ISO config file, and we're going to start with, anytime I have the ISO config file open and I make a change in the project setup, it's going to want me to reload the ISO config file with those changes. That's the way this software works. All right, so here's the file name format. I'll look at prefix model types, suffix, sheet number. So right here you can see It put in attribute 8. That was the file one. ISO file. Attribute 9. That was the number. There's my revision. And then everything else. Suffix is blank. You can't add a suffix in the project setup. And there's the sheet number setup. That was set up in the project setup. So you can see how I put that in there, but I want to get what I want. So basically I want a hyphen between these two. So here I can add the delimiter dash. After the line number, if it goes to a sheet, I want an underscore. So I'm going to go ahead and put the underscore here. But revision, I don't want that until after the sheet number. So I'm just going to copy revision. Clicked in here, copied revision, come down here to the suffix and add revision there. At this point, I don't need this one. I don't want revision twice. So I'm just going to delete it. So now I've got my attribute 8 dash attribute 9 underscore sheet number with a suffix of revision. The suffix delimiter goes before it. So if I put a period here for delimiter, that would give me this exactly in both instances. So you can see I can format the file naming to whatever I want just by setting up these properties right here. I just had to have that attribute 8 and 9 in there to reference them in that ISO ATR, which I had to create some things to do that. But that will do the file name format. So I want to do something similar now to this drawing name. Remember, that's what is being controlled by drawing name format. So for it, I'm going to just minimize this stuff. Right now, it's set up to be a pipeline reference. I don't need any of this, so I'm not going to deal with that. But here, this is going to be one of the attributes, but it's going to be the attribute 7 because that was the one for the drawing. So I'm going to just copy this one so I don't have to type. I hate typing. And then I'll change it to attribute 7. And it's going to be a space for the delimiter because it's going to go P141 space, and then I need that line number. Again, that's attribute 9. Save myself some time. I'm going to copy the model property. Come down here to this one and say paste after. And now I've got attribute 7 space attribute 9. Nothing. It's going. That's the end of it. That's what I want right there. So I'm going to save it. And let's see what happens. For this, I am going to overwrite or create these two only. I'll let it just create them. You've seen these old ones. I'm just going to get rid of those and remove them once it gets to the point that it's past this here. Come on, machine. There we go. I thought. There we go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and remove this old one here just because it's completely different name. There's no reason to keep it, even though it's Rev 0. But mainly, I just wanted to get it out of the way so we can see what we're doing here a little bit better. So this is going to do almost exactly what I want. The file naming is perfect. And it's not the way I would normally do the drawing name just because I don't want the sheet number as part of my drawing name or my drawing number, but you'll see in a minute. All right, so here you go. You can see my sheet filing system is exactly what I wanted. P141-2102.1 for Rev 1. And here I've got P141 Sheet 1, Sheet 2, both of them are Rev 1. That's the way I wanted it. I could have used this as a dot and R1. You can do whatever. I could have instead of an underscore, I could have made that S1 and S2. It's only going to put this in if there's a sheet 2. And here it's going to be whatever rev number I want. So that's the file naming system I wanted exactly. Drawing number, let's look at that. If I look at this one, first I'll show you. Got the 2" in there for the installation thickness. That worked like I want, and looks like my drawing number is exactly what I want, P141-2102. So I'm controlling that the way I want it. Here's a little catch for this particular one, though. for me at least. All right, so here you can see no insulation. I don't have an inch mark anymore. So that's working. See here, it's putting 1100 sheet 1, and here's 1100 sheet 2. So I'm still getting my sheet number in there, which is redundant because I have it right here. The reason it's doing that is because I have the sheet number property here. Unfortunately, you can't delete it. You delete it, it's just going to do it anyways. And you can only change it from number to alphabetical. There's no other option. So I could change it to A, B, C, stuff like that. So I'm kind of stuck with it and can't get rid of it. For that reason, I prefer not to use the drawing name format in my particular system. So here's how I would do it in my system myself. I mean, some people, a lot of people, as long as you're good with sheet numbers being part of this, that a lot of people are fine with this. They can do everything right here. That's why I wanted to show it. For me, I would do it a little bit different just because I don't want the sheet number as part of my drawing number. And so for that, I'm just going to do it kind of quick here to get project set up. I'm going to go back to my isometric drawing setting title block and setup. And for this, when I go to my title block attributes, I'm going to come over here, and this ISO drawing one I'm going to get rid of because I'm going to make my drawing number when I map it here. So my drawing number here, instead of being ISO name, it's going to be my ISO drawing. So I'm going to use that one to create the drawing number that I want. I'm just can't have it in there twice, two different ones referencing to the same property. So that's why I had to delete this one, assign it to that one. I'm pretty much done with this part of it. So I'm going to go ahead and save all this. And we'll get back over here to the calculation of the properties. Right here, I'll go ahead and type calc. There's my plant defined properties. So I am going to redefine the ISO drawing right here. So now it's going to be P141 space, and then we'll concatenate that with the number. And that will give me what I want for a drawing number. No sheet number included. I'll apply it. I'll close it. I've literally done it. I'm going to just go ahead and say, do it, create it again. I'm done. So I've shown you a couple of things you can do here with how the drawing format and the file name format happens. Since I'm no longer using drawing name in my title block, I don't have to come in here and clean this out and delete this stuff because it doesn't matter. I'm not using it, only if I'm using that DWG name attribute, which I'm not anymore. All right, while it's doing that, let's talk about something else we're going to do here. I'm going to come over here and I want to make a little change to some annotation here. I want this line number, the pipeline number here, to pop. I want it to stand out on my drawing. Excuse me. I want it to stand out on my drawing. I want it to be, man, time is flying. I'm going to have to didn't notice that. This may be a little longer than normal. I want this to be an Arial font, 1/8 inch high. If you notice, all my text is the same font, all my text is the same height. That's because in the project setup, let's take a look at this real quick just to show you it's fixed. Here you go, P141 1100, P141 1100. So they have the same one, they're differentiated by the sheet. So that got me what I wanted there. And I'm finished with those two drawings now. We'll just mainly concentrate on this one for the sake of time. All right, so I want to get that in here, that line number to stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and close this in the project setup. One of the settings you need to be aware of is on annotations right here under isometric, and that's this text height. It's set to 3/32 of an inch. What happens is whatever text style I'm using, it multiplies 3/32 of an inch by it, and that's how it decides the text height of everything in that drawing as far as the annotations. Now, Let's go to make an area. I need an Arial font in my template so that I can use it. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to set up the title block. And in here, all I'm going to do is create a text style. I'm going to style. Note when you come in what your current text style is. That's the one you want to leave here with. So it's ADS Imperial. That's what I want. If I was to go through the text styles, which you'll see in a minute in the ISO config, they're all using ADESC ISO annotation, which has a 1 inch height. So what it's doing is taking that 330 seconds times 1 inch, comes out 330 seconds of an inch, and that's all the text in there was 330 seconds of an inch as a result. I want mine a little bigger. So I'm going to create a new one, and I want to use an Arial. And I'm going to call this, because keep with my system here, VI for my company initials, ISO. All the others are being used in the title block elsewhere someplace. So VI ISO is going to be my company one. This one's going to use my Arial text font way up here. Now I can't even find Arial. There it is, Arial. I'll keep it regular, and so everything else is the same. But the important thing is here. If I want 1/8 inch text height, I've got to set this height to where when it's multiplied by 330 seconds of an inch, it comes out to 1/8. So for that, it's pretty simple. I'm going to take 1/8 inch, divide it by 330 seconds, and that's 1.333. So if I set this to 1.3333 or whatever, go ahead and apply it. Basically, when it's working, because that thing's set to 330 seconds times 0.09375 equals 1/8 inch. So that's how I can get a bigger text height out of this text style. Okay, now before I exit here, my current text style is not what it was when I came in, so I'm going to reset that to what it was that the Isometrics is going to need for some other work. I'll hit close. We'll return to project setup. Now that we have a text style created, we can go in the ISO config and use that text style wherever we want to. And in our case, it's going to be in the line number scheme. Let's go down here to themes. These are the name configurations. Remember, this is probably the main place most people do most of their configurations inside this file. So this is the default one. That's where we're going to deal with what we're doing here. All right, so just a quickie on this stuff. Dimensions, all set up in project setup. Just do it there. Bend elbow, set up in project setup. Symbols are set up in project setup. Insulation is for the most part set up in project setup, but we're going to tweak some of that even in here in a minute. Annotations is where people do their work. The only thing in annotation that's set up in project setup is that text height. Everything else we'll do here. Now you can see here, there's where that text height is set up and some of the other settings that were in there. But again, this all has to do with just directions and stuff like that. Here you have leader styles, annotation styles, and annotation schemes. Leader styles and styles are where you create your leader styles and your text styles. Annotation schemes are where you tell what's using it. So let me give you an example of thinking in AutoCAD. Here you're creating a text style, just like you would in the style command of AutoCAD. The only difference is you're telling it which style in AutoCAD you're using. You're not actually you're just naming the one which one you're going to use. Here, think of it as you're creating a dimension style, and you're going to tell that dimension style which text style it's going to use. That's basically what you're doing here. You could be creating a dimension style and telling it which leader style it's going to use. We're not going to go through leader styles. We're just going to do this. They all work the same. So let's create an annotation style first. You can see here I've got them for, there's the standard one. Everything's defined. Circle, what annotation style, text styles it's going to use, rectangles, everything you can think of is defined in here with a text style. And I can reference it in my scheme which one I'm going to use. But you can see out of the box, everything's using the exact same text style. So I'm going to create one for mine that I'm going to reference. I'm going to say copy this standard one. I'm going to paste it right after it. So now I have two standards. I'm going to name this one Arial 1/8 inch high Arial text. It's going to be using VI_ISO. So there's the text style I used and created in AutoCAD. Should be lowercase. I don't know if it matters, and there's what I'm going to call it inside here as a reference. So that created the style. That's all I needed to do. So now I need to add a scheme down here, and you can see there's schemes for everything. Here's schemes for Mesahega, scheme for reinforcement. Here's scheme for insulation, which we're going to deal with in a minute. Right now, line number scheme is up here at the top. That's the pipeline numbers we're looking at. You can see it's using annotation style standard. Well, we want it to use annotation style Arial 1/8. Oops, yeah, that's right. And that's all I want to do. Tell it, hey, use the one I just created instead, Arial 1/8, and that's going to be the style we're using up there. That tells it exactly which one we want to use in the project. So I'll save it. We'll go over here and let this be creating it, and we'll talk about kind of doubling up here to try to save some time. Instead of me running my mouth while it's creating it, I'll get back onto what we're going to do next, which is the insulation. So if you come down here, you'll see eventually, let's say I want to, from where I'm at, let me get back to where I'm at first. I'm going to first, because there's some other things with insulation that's not there. So I'm going to come, I just double click here and that puts me in the right spot here. I'm going to search under here with a Control F for the word insulation. And there's where it comes popping up. All right, this one is now finished. So let's take a look at the results. And there you go. A little bit bigger text, different font. It pops a little bit more. I could have made it a little bigger maybe if I wanted to. There's one over here doing the same thing. So you can kind of see how that worked, but just changing that one. So you can kind of see I can start to tweak these things a little bit to get whatever results I need to. All right, so we found insulation limit here. Now this one is for the, let me right click on it here and do refresh, and that opens it up here. This is for right here. You'll see where it says not insulation and insulation. I had a support case where they did not want that to show up on their isometrics. To get that to not show up, what you would have to do is find the insulation limit, which I just did. Come down here on this line. We're going to go ahead and do this on the right-hand side because basically I have to tell it it's not enabled. So I'm going to put in enabled equals. So I'm actually adding that information to the end of the line on this side. That way when over here, you can see now it's added. Now I could have copied this one, pasted it, and typed it here also. Either way would have worked. Just showing you multiple ways to get information in there. I could change it on either side of this window. But by telling it that my insulation limit is false, it won't show those in my isometrics anymore. So I can turn something off. If it doesn't have enabled equals true or enabled equals false already in there, I can add it, and that will turn it off in the isometric to where I can't see it anymore. Something you can't do with a lot of items in the project setup. We'll look at that in a minute. First, we're going to go ahead and go to the next part of insulation. So I'm going to go do another Control F under it and find the next insulation. And that happens to be here at the component scheme, which I knew where it was already, but if I hit refresh on it, there it is. So this is the insulation by itself. If I go to the next where it's got map scheme under it, there's my insulation with tracing. This particular insulation right here that we're looking at in this particular drawing has tracing. So I want to show up the electrical tracing as well as the insulation. Plus, I want to play with this text right here where it says H-2 inch. If you look at this in this drawing here, I've got my insulation type thickness 2, my insulation type is H, and down here a little bit lower, you'll see insulation spec is set to H450. I want the H450 in there. So I want it to say H450-2 inch instead of H2-2 inch. So I want to add some more information in there. All right, so to do this, we're going to start with looking at how this is set up. Because this is going to be true with anything. So this is just one example, and you can use this in other areas if you need to add something at all. First of all, the insulation spec here. Let's look under field map. This is for the map scheme here for the ones with tracing. It's got two different pieces here. Tag X is for the insulation and thickness. Tag Y is for the tracing spec, where it said electrical in the middle. We're dealing with tag here, where it's putting in insulation thickness. Now, one thing I do have up here that I didn't do up here that I meant to, that's insulation spec. All right, never mind. So here I want to deal with, the insulation spec here is actually insulation type. I don't know why they call it spec when they're pulling in type. I need insulation spec, but that's going to take an ISO attribute to pull it. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in. This belongs to, I don't need this anymore. This belongs to the pipe run component, not that. If I put it right here, I'll be able to actually access it, not have to worry about attributes up here, but it's only for, so this one was using pipeline group insulation spec. That's why it's getting the H. Actually, that's the H450 there too. This is the H450 here. So this is a different insulation spec. So that's insulation dash spec. This one's insulation spec. Can get confusing sometimes, but if I add it here, that'll give me the information I'm looking for here. But that needs to be in here. So it was basically insulation, no dash was the difference. I'm going to add that here without the dash. So that's basically saying I got three fields I can access: insulation spec, insulation thickness, and insulation spec, which is defined in that ISO attribute. 0 for my format is this one. 1 is this one. So this one will be 2. Now, the 1 has an inch sign over it. So that's why we saw H-2 inches. This one is the one that says H450. That's the one I want to reference. So I'm going to go ahead and change this from 0 to 2 so that I'm referencing this one dash thickness inches. So that's what these two ones work with. I want my insulation to work the same way as my ones with tracing. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this up to here. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this up to here. So that way insulation without tracing and insulation with tracing, both are working identical with the same format, the same schemes. Okay, so now all I have to do is save this, and we'll go ahead and create another one right here. And then we'll be able to see what's changed there. For the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and go on to talking a little bit about the next one we're going to deal with: instruments and balloons on bill of materials. See what's something that might have an instrument that I forgot about. I think I've got an instrument on, I may not, or I can't remember. But anyways, I can't remember what other pipeline has an instrument off the top of my head. But I bet this one does. Right here, but it's on a different drawing. Well, it's already in, so now I can just show you on that one. Wasn't able to save that time after all. All right, so here we go. You can see the insulation node is gone. And now over here, H450-2 inch Still got my electrical tracing in there. I forgot to turn the tracing on itself. Went up here. Da, 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 da. Now I'm going to X up it up higher. Let me find that. I forgot to do that. I apologize. Let's go backwards. Let's see if that's the one or not. Refresh. Nope, haven't went back far enough yet. Find next, it's gonna make me go, let's go up here. Oh, now it's looking for a leader style. All right, basically I forgot to turn it on. I could do that in the, I guess in the, that's the symbol. All right, let me do that manually. Let me make sure this is saved first so I don't lose anything. I can do that in the project setup. I forgot to turn it on. That was one of the, I was going to show you that, but this has been moved into here anyways. So let's see. Boom, boom. This on the title block here. Show insulation on isometric drawing. That's the one I wanted. So next time I create this, and there'll be insulation around here. You can control the thickness of that in the isoconfig. I'm just out of time. I'm going to have to move on from that one. So bill of material. If you notice in the bill of material here, there's no isometric instruments. And if you look over here at this instrument, there's no bubble on it, like where you've got item 2 here and item and things like that. They're not there out of the box. This is probably one of the most common requests I had made for me in the past. So this is dealing with the aggregated list of the data. You come in here, you can see I've got a bunch of aggregated lists. This is bill of materials. This one is shop materials. This one's for field materials. Down here, you get into piping and cut lists and welds and different stuff. So these are the lists for how it creates these tables that we're dealing with right here. This is the bill of materials one is called materials. So everything about it is right here under data, aggregated lists. So the aggregated lists are literally the content for these tables and what's going to go into these tables. And the groups here is the organization of that. So you can see here, group is pipe. Then you've got the group of fittings. And that's, if you notice, that's the sequence they were in the title block. For sake of time, I want to open it back up. It's the same sequence, valves and pipe supports. So what I need to do is add instruments to this pipe support. And the name, of course, is dealing with the filter. So I'm going to copy the group of the pipe supports, and I'm going to paste it after there. So now I've got 2 pipe support groups. But I want pipe supports to go after valves. So I'm going to leave the bottom one and change this one right here to my instruments. It's real simple. Instruments. No, it's not plural though. Name's going to be instrument. My row filter, it's going to be instrument. Now I'm typing it exactly like they did. They had all caps, title case. Labels, label, lowercase, instrument. So I have 3 places I have to put in what I'm actually including, in this case, the instrument. How do I want it to sort? That's type ascending, that's fine. I don't need connection size ascending, so I'm going to get rid of that one. And that basically is it. I literally copied pipe supports, made those 3 changes there to instrument, told it how I wanted to sort. It will now include instruments in my bill of materials because I've added it to the aggregated list. It's part of the organization, and it will be in that sequence after valves, before pipe supports. Cannot do that in the project setup. That gets the item in the bill of material. It doesn't put the balloon on the instrument itself. That is a theme. So back in the themes, back in it's an annotation, And so we'll go back to annotation schemes. Okay, here is where I want to add that information. If I go to the very bottom here, you'll see there's a bend radius. I'll just do that one. I'm just going to copy it. I'll paste right after it. Doesn't matter about sequence here. Now I've got 2 bend radiuses, and I'm going to make this one the instrument. So again, this one I'm going to change to instruments. This time it is plural, by the way. Annotation style. All right, all my other bill of materials items are being done by rectangle, not standard. So I'm going to go ahead and put rectangle in just like the others. The format, I don't want the word bend radius before it. I just want the 0. That's the instrument information that's being pulled from the field. Okay, which we're not to yet. It's enabled true, flat, all that sounds good. The filter here, instrument, that's the filter it's using down below. And the fields here will be part number. If I looked up here in the component schemes, you'd see there's one for part number that's used for all the bill of materials. So this tells it to use the part number for the bill of material in this rectangle. Now, if I changed in the project setup from a rectangle to a circle, this would update just like all the other bill of material items. So this is being actually controlled and ultimately in the project setup. But this gets everything I need in there for the item number. So let's try it out and see what we got. Go here, come over here, and we'll create one more production ISO. And while it's doing that, I'll do one more thing and then I'll start answering some questions. It's just because I told you I would do it, and that's showing you rounding on units. I'll come down here to this, let's see, now it's actually, which one? PW1100, yeah, PW1100, that's will work. Because my piping, I don't have anything not rounding pretty close already to the way it should. It took me a while to find a piece of pipe. This pipe here, though, this 26 foot 3 1/4 cut list, I'll make it round, not round, so I'll get an exact number on it. That's what we're going to do next. First, right here, there you go. There's my instrument number 13, pressure reducing valve. It's right after the other valves and before the supports. And over here, there's my, there it is, number 13, pointing at the valves. So I added the bill of material information. It was a 2-step process. I had to add to the aggregated list to get it to show up in the bill of material. I had to add to the annotation theme to get it to actually put the bubble on it. So that's how that works. One last one, and I'm glad you get to watch this and you can at a later date, because I know I've kind of picked up the pace here. It's just a lot to cover in such a short time. All right, so I want to make this stop rounding. It's one simple little thing. We're going to come up here and look under units. And under units, you've got the different things. They all work the same as far as rounding goes. This is going to be my pipe length that I'm going to be changing. And right here, you can see it's set to rounded true. I'm just going to simply set it to false. Now, if you set the pipe length to false, you want to set the pipe length alternate style to false also. So that just tells it don't round. And I'm going to end with this. And then come in here and let this go ahead and create. By the way, I forgot to show you. There's my insulation thickness and stuff around there. But anyways, back here, we'll go ahead and let this recreate. And that will give us a chance to look at the questions that we have here. So while that's creating, let me see if there's any questions I need to be answering, because basically we've covered a little bit of everything in a global time. So let's see if anyone has any questions. I don't see any questions so far. I'll look at that for a second while that's still printing. And I may even, if I don't have any questions, just dawned on me where that other setting was. So let me look at that real quick. Back here under where themes and defaults. I don't know why I missed this one. One of them I forgot to show you. Okay, so here's the insulation, and right here I could set, that's where I could have set that to true. But here I can set the thickness of that insulation to around the line. That's something you can't do in the project setup. So we'll let that go also on this one while so if you looked at this one, we'll look at it real quick. I should have made it Rev 2. We'll look at this one real quick and close it before, so you can see how thick those are around it. That's what I'm changing right there. All right, so say no, come back over here, and this one was the cut list. You can see it's now 26 foot 3 and 3/16 of an inch. So instead of rounding to the 1/4 inch, it gave me the exact cut length. So if that is an issue for you, which I had a support case where it was, turn off the rounding and you'll get an exact number instead of a rounding. I don't use a lot of fixed pipes, so I don't have that effect as much as what some of my clients do. All right. Here I've got one. I can't read. Let me see if I can separate this from there and make it a little bit bigger. All right, what about %-%? That won't work. I'm assuming you're talking about in the file name format. It will not let you put anything but property %. So that's what I'm assuming you're asking is about the %-% won't work in the file name format. And I tried it. I've tried putting quotes around it. I've tried putting inch marks around it. It just won't take anything but a property name inside the project setup. Is there a way to set the tolerance for slope? If the center lines are off by a fraction of an inch, it shows the slope on the ISO. You might check the skew section and look through there. I've never been asked that question, so I'm not real sure if you can, but you can see there's a lot in here. It may be, I would look first for any type of rounding type thing. It looks to me like it's, see, these are just dealing with the symbols themselves. So if it's in here, it may be changing one of these numbers. Here's a maximum slope and a minimum slope. I would start with that. Here's a tolerance, skew tolerance equal point. So you might try playing with that. Always make a copy of your isoconfig XML. So if you do mess something up, that's what I had to do when I was playing with that one that caused it to go to a 30-minute typo or something. But I would check in there. It wouldn't surprise me if maybe some of this might. I would say this is the one I would start playing with first because it says tolerance. But play with some of those and you might be able to find exactly what you're looking for. Is the enable equal false command global or just per drawing? It's not per drawing, it's per isoconfig, which means it's per the ISO style, because again, you have different isometric styles in here. You probably seen where you have the different ones. Plus, you can have like the final ANSI C, final C. I only have Vandelay B in this project, so it's not going to show anything but that one. But if I had the final ANSI C or the final ANSI B, if I just change it to Vandelay B, that's the only one it's going to happen in. So it's just it's not per drawing, it's per style, ISO style. Is the enable equal false a global command or per drawing? That's the same one I just answered. Okay. All right. So any more questions? And I apologize. This is that isometric title block one was the longest webinar I've ever done. It went 1 hour and 15 minutes. I just tied it with this one. Isometrics are very, very in depth, but if I went through something too fast, just go watch the video. You'll get a link to that at the end here. She's going to tell you about that. I'm going to look at for questions just for another minute or two, but while we're doing that, let me, thank you very much, really appreciate it. Okay, while we're doing that, let me go into show you some, hopefully that's not on your screen. I don't see any more questions. So basically, here are some training classes coming up. If you haven't had training or need training, we have some advanced and new user, both in P&ID and plant, and the quick start in P&ID also, which is the new user, coming up at these dates. Be sure to go check that out online. And I will turn this over now to Ashley.
Well, thank you, Rick, for the presentation, and thank you for everyone for attending today. This will conclude our broadcast. If you think of additional questions for Rick, you can simply reply to that confirmation or reminder email that you received from GoToWebinar, and we can get that to Rick or your sales rep to get your questions answered. Once again, there will be a short survey as we close down today, and we would appreciate you filling that out for us. And also a reminder that you will receive an email tomorrow containing a link for the recording of today's presentation. Thanks again for attending, and have a great day, everyone.